Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. I'm hoping you guys are having a fantastic day. So in today's video, as you can tell by the title, we will be talking about a potential series of snowstorms brought by very cold air that will be occurring across the country. Most likely, I mean, this isn't a certainty. At this point though, I would say it's a 70 to 80% chance that we are entering a very cold and potentially snowy pattern into early January. And some people may be thinking that, oh yeah, no kidding, it's January. Well, when I mean, snowy and cold, I mean compared to average. Obviously, Januaries are snowy and cold, but these storms look like something I haven't seen in a while. There's been definitely times in the past where we've seen patterns like this, and they've been showing up, in the 200, 300-hour time frame. Usually these patterns, as consistent as they've been, amount to something at least. Sometimes they are more of a dud, other times they are not. That remains to be seen with this, but we are looking at some potentially incredible storms occurring across the United States, especially given what we've been seeing this past few weeks with a lot of warmth, and in general the whole winter has been rather lackluster. Yes, there's been a few areas that have gotten quite a bit of snow, like the lake effect belt of the country and potentially the west, but otherwise extremely snowless winter for the most part. I'm sure that it has been the case for a lot of people, and I could look at the seasonal snowfall map analysis, and you can see that on these observations we have this feature that we could look at seasonal snowfall analysis, and very paltry snow. New England, a little bit of snow there for sure, and again, a foot and a half for those areas. Honestly, some of them that is still below average. Again, as I said, lake effect belts I've seen quite a bit, but look at this. I mean, a lot of the Dakotas, Minnesota, not seen a lot of snow this year. The West has, but again, that is the West, so they typically see snow even in a pretty crummy winter because of, well, it's usually cold enough for snow in the mountains. But do note that what we are looking at here is a potential pattern change, a drastic one, especially given now we are looking at some ridiculously warm temperature anomalies. If I pull up the current temperature, 2-meter temperature anomaly graph, which shows us how above or below average the temperatures are right now, you can see they are approaching off the charts here, 12 to 20 degrees above average Celsius across the whole entire United States. This thing is not just in one area of the United States, it's the whole dang country that's been very warm and very balmy. Some have this, for some this has been very nice. Even for my area, it's been 50s, rather cloudy, but I've got some garden work that I got done, so it was definitely pleasant to see. But this will soon come to a change. So let me just run through the GFS model. In the short term right now, we do have a severe weather outbreak ongoing right now across the southern United States, which you can see there's a moderate risk for severe weather going on right now across the Mississippi and into portions of extreme western Alabama. The main threat is tornadoes and wind, so that is definitely something you guys, if you live in this area and in general south into tonight and tomorrow, tune into your local weather services and keep an eye on the sky, and be safe, because these winter nighttime tornadoes can definitely sometimes catch a lot of people off guard, but they do happen. So do note that this storm, I mean, its shape is a winter storm-like. It has a cold front, a warm front, except that it's so warm that usually where the snow would be occurring on the backside of this, especially, at this time of the year, it's all rain, and only until it pretty much hits Canada, we start seeing some snow occurring with this. So really an incredible show of just how warm it's been and how much warmth there has been. But notice that what we do see is a major system move into the west and bring a lot of snow. There's winter storm warnings up and whatnot across the west. And we see a low pressure that spills into the country. This is midweek next week, around New Year's Eve into New Year's Day. We'll have a low pressure that has some snow into Nebraska. The pattern will begin to cool down at this point, not only because of this system, that behind the low pressure, we see resurgence of cold air. Behind every single cold or low pressure, there are winds from the north and west. And if there is cold air to the north and west of a low pressure, it gets put down, which in this case there is. So that brings up a little bit of that cool air. Again, not really going to be colder than average, but it's going to make things more average compared to where we have been. And then do note that this system, the second one right here, you can see is on the southern side of a larger air mass, cooler air mass, that starts sliding to the south. For the longest time now, we've had a really strong high pressure right here that's kept a lot of this warm air pumping up north. This thing kind of slides off to the east, so you can see the cold air is allowed to drag down further south. This low pressure, again, accelerates that in some areas as the winds come in from the northwest behind that. Though again, you can see a rather snowless system. It's not a massive low pressure, but it is going to be one that brings some showers and rain into New Year's Eve for some. You could see Tuesday, so New York City, around where where they may be dropping the ball, it could be raining there for the New Year's Eve celebration across the Northeast. So not the best of news, but unfortunately that seems to be the case. But notice that the pattern change from a warm to cold isn't brought by an abrupt massive system. It kind of happens almost casually. And if you do note that at this point, if I were to click on a temperature anomaly, while it isn't necessarily cold yet, it is quite a bit more colder compared to these anomalies, which were here just a few time frames ago, and that's already noticeable. But the cold air is still nowhere to be seen. So where is that coming from? Well, we do see a series of very large systems continuing to come in now more onto the northwest as opposed to the southwest, and these continue to ride the jet stream as it continues to force the cold air down into the southern United States. Now, this isn't anything extraordinary right here. This cold air is right around average, more normal to what we should be seeing. It will feel a lot colder compared to what we've been seeing across the United States. Notice some small clipper systems maybe coming in, nothing major. But from one of these systems that eventually makes its way onto the northwest, eventually sooner or later, the GFS and Europeans show this system right here around the Saturday time frame of next week, not this Saturday obviously, delivering a powerful blast of precipitation for the northwest, and it finally activates some of that cold air. And with that more moisture, it potentially brings us our first snowstorm. Now again, the warm air is still plentiful across the south, and you can see even potentially high pressure sets up here. So what this does is it drives a lot of moisture into this relatively cold air and delivers a snow system. Now the European and GFS have been showing this system on and off now for a decent bit of time. You can see it shows a lot of snow across Indiana, Ohio, Pennsylvania, quite a bit more of rain towards the south. But because of how present this cold air is across, say, central southern Canada, behind this low pressure, especially since this high pressure is moved off and it can't bring any more further or southern warm air to the north, this cold air just sags into the southern United States, or just south from Canada into the United States, and followed behind that system we see more and more cold air. Now at this point, if I were to click at the 2-meter temperature anomaly graph, you could see it's chilly, it's below average. So again, it isn't necessarily a massive abrupt change. That system definitely seems to be the one that brings more of that below average temperatures. But these aren't records by any means. This is just your average garden variety of a cold blast. But there are some signs. The models, especially the GFS with this scenario, shows a lot of cold air moving in. We have a series of very strong high pressures. If you look at that, that is a 1050 high pressure. That is pretty much as strong as they get. High pressures, they spin clockwise. So it's bringing in warm air into, say, British Columbia, the Gulf of Alaska, but on the backside of it, it is pummeling this cold air to the south very quickly. And what that gives us is a snowstorm potentially that sets up very far south across the southern United States, somewhere around a week and a half from now. So again, this is still very far out. I'm not going into details about this system. You can see the GFS in this scenario does show a system that is very far south, bringing a lot of snow and a lot of precipitation, because while it sits so far south, it has almost immediate and direct access to moisture that is sitting across the Atlantic and Gulf of Mexico, and this thing rides up the northeast coast in a classic nor'easter fashion. So obviously the snowfall footprint from this would be pretty big. You could see 9, 7, 8 inches pretty much spread all throughout the mid-south and across the northeast, where it goes further intensification. Easily a foot, even more, especially where those two snowfall tracks overlie from both of those systems. Now, again, I'm not saying that either of these storms will necessarily occur in the way that the GFS is showing you, but the indications have been there for a while. I made a video on December 24th, Christmas Eve, showing you guys talking and showing you about a cold pattern. Ever since then, the models have been consistently showing it, and they probably will continue to. Now, exactly what that manifests as remains to be seen, but notice that the GFS here, especially in this model run, brings in some incredibly cold air behind this system right here. We see a high pressure, again, very strong high pressure, 1050, very high pressure, driving in essentially a polar vortex, not only into the United States, but deep into the United States. Notice where some of the snow is occurring off the coast of Florida, and it brings the 32 degree line, potentially showing snow even in central Florida. Now again, look at Tampa right there, a little bit of snow. That would be an extreme scenario, and I'm not saying that will happen, but the models have been hinting at some level of polar vortex type air hitting the United States. Now you can see this specific run targets the eastern United States, especially the southern United States, with extremely cold temperatures. If you were to take a look at this, the temperature for the thermometer readings, you can see negatives all the way down into the deep south. New Orleans sitting at 18, even Tampa getting below freezing. So really, really cold air that we don't see often. Look at that. My goodness, into southern Florida showing very cold temperatures. Now, will this happen? Probably not, because this is a more extreme scenario. But it does show you that, well, there is some signs of cold air. And potentially in an extreme scenario, we can get something like this where we see a cold break all the way into the southern United States there. So that was a GFS model, which is one model. Let's take a look at the European model, right? This is another one. It comes out every 12 hours. That goes out to 360 hours, and then every 6 hours it goes out to 150, 40 hours-ish. So not as far-reaching as a GFS, but still has a good range. So up until that next midwinter next week, it shows the same pattern as the GFS. We have that massive system, which again, this would have normally been probably a snow shield if this was a regular winter, except it's so warm it doesn't convert into snow until it's way into Canada. Look at that system right there. That's almost seems so out of place. We do see that system midweek next week coming in. Again, nothing major out of it. There will be some snow across Nebraska, Iowa, potentially disrupting some travel going on around New Year's Eve, and this thing scurries away. Not really strengthening into anything spectacular, but it could provide a rather wet New Year's Eve for the Northeast, so that is definitely not something a lot of people would want to see. Behind that, we see yet even more cold air sneaking in, and with that, we see, again, maybe some small clippers, but we see one of these, again, just like the GFS, a large northwest system hitting the coast and developing into a storm, our first major storm of the year in terms of 2025, but also really the season. And you can see potentially Iowa, Nebraska, Illinois. The European definitely shows the system a bit more well organized and put together compared to the GFS, and you can see right there it blasts through these areas, dropping plenty of snow potentially for the Midwest and Great Lakes. Definitely the first big one of the year. However, again, there's still disagreement on that. Some models showing it differently. Other ones, show it, then don't show it. So we'll have to wait and see, but there are some signs around it. 190, 200 hour time frame, a system. It's far out, but it's enough of a sign where we could start paying attention to it. And then do notice the European does show really, really cold air coming in. Lots of clippers. Some snow potentially into, the southern United States here, Louisiana, Mississippi, but no big massive storm like the GFS was showing. And again, we probably won't see any clearance or any agreement on that till much later on, because this is at this point almost 300 hours out, which is very far out. But again, by the 9th, 10th of January, there's going to probably be some mass of cold air sitting across the country, and we could see a potential southern U.S. storm. Again, not all models are showing that. You can see the European doesn't. But again, it did show that first one like the GFS has been showing. So that's one they have more agreements on. If you were to take a look at the European model ensemble, so this is a ensemble, is basically a family of models, and the European is one family, and we could look at their 15-day snowfall. Now there's 50 of these models, and you can see some show snow across the Great Lakes, a little bit across the south. That definitely is an indicator that it agrees with that cold air outlook. Some show a much larger system targeting more of the East Coast there, Virginia, North Carolina, potentially a foot, 2 feet of snow in this graphic. Again, these are just different variations, different possibilities of what could happen. A lot of these are all over the place, but do note it shows that snow stretching very far south and into the south of New Orleans. This one does show, so that all of them pretty much agree that there will be cold air reaching pretty far south the United States, completely different from now. And some again are showing extreme scenarios like that GFS model, showing snow across showing snow across Florida. So some again keep it more towards the north, not as much to the south. There are definitely models though, like I'll show you in just a bit here, that show more snow, significant snows across the south. Look at this one showing massive snows across the mid-Atlantic and northeast there. Look at this one showing a potential blizzard almost there occurring across the panhandle of Florida into Alabama, Georgia. That would be interesting. These models are definitely showing a lot of cold air very far south. This one's showing Atlanta almost getting a foot of snow there. So, yeah, we will definitely have to keep an eye on this. These models are still all over the place, but almost all of them, noticed, are showing some level of snow, significant snow, and it's also has quite a bit of them showing some snow very far south with that polar Arctic outbreak. So we'll have to keep things watchful. For now, though, this is all I pretty much can show you, but just even the small, the gray areas, that doesn't show significant snow, but it shows that it's going to be cold enough for snow as, far south as Louisiana, the Gulf Coast, into Florida, central Florida. That is definitely extreme, and they are pretty consistent for as far out as this thing still is. And look at there, another one showing a very far southern system. And as uncertain as, things are, and especially compared to the warm pattern we are seeing now, a complete change on. I mean, some of these areas are seeing tornadoes right now in Mississippi, right? Tornado warnings. And the European model shows potentially out of these areas getting some snow in the near future. So, definitely crazy. GEFS, this is another ensemble that I look at. I can't show you the whole United States, unfortunately, so I'll just try focusing on the eastern United States. It's kind of far away, so we probably won't be able to see much. But if you look at all their graphs, I don't have to individually click through them like with the European ones. You can see a lot of them do show snow pretty far south. Again, agreeing with the European there with those snowfall amounts, with that cold air obviously allowing for that snow to occur in the first place, and then again, a snowstorm with that as well. So we'll have to wait and see. It's definitely looking more and more interesting each day, and I'll continue keeping you guys updated on these model runs. The GFS, I would say, has been a little bit less consistent, right? So notice that the new one that came out at noon today, it showed a similar pattern up until around 144 hours, and that's when it started kind of diverging. And you can see that it showed that system, that first one, right? It was further up north than its most recent one in the evening, and it didn't show at noon today, right? The massive southern snowstorm. So obviously that makes sense. It's really far out, but it's doing a bit more jumping around than, say, the European model. And then you can see in the morning hours today, the GFS, again, showed those first two smaller systems, but it failed to even show the one that it could be occurring around the 6th. You can see there it is. It failed to phase it with the southern moisture, versus the more recent ones are, showing some sort of a system. The one at 6 o'clock today wasn't, and then the one at midnight today also, or midnight last night, also didn't show a system of really major magnitude. Some snow, yes, but nothing crazy. Yesterday evening it also didn't show, well, it did show it, sorry, in the evening it did, but you can see it was still not as organized. Well, the European model has been showing this this first system, at least first and only at this point that has any sort of confidence behind it, with more confidence. So this was today at noon. This was yesterday at midnight. You can see it showed that system. A little bit different, obviously, with the track and whatnot, but it still showed it. And then yesterday at noon, again, it showed that system. So a bit more consistent than the GFS for sure. That's why I prefer the European at this point over the GFS, but we will have to wait and see how the European continues to progress. As long with the GFS, because that model is also important. But yes, some of these temperature anomalies are looking rather ridiculous on the GFS outlooks, and the European one, for matter of fact, is. So notice we go from a really warm pattern to an extremely cold pattern. It's basically for now and for today's video. Just wanted to give you an update on this cold air. It definitely seems like things are going to get active. We will be seeing a lot more cold air and a lot more snow chances, especially compared to what we've been seeing, which has been, nothing shy of record heat. These are the ensembles of the European EPS, so this isn't just one European model, it's the whole family, and you can see that overall they definitely show that warm air we are seeing now moving away, followed by more cold air, and that potentially sticking around into mid to late January. So that's all I have for you guys today, and I'll catch you guys in the next episode. See ya. Bye.